Matteo, por favor, bem-vindo ao palco.
Está contigo, Matteo.
Tá, obrigado. Bom dia a todos vocês. É um grande prazer estar aqui para abrir esta plenária para falar dos tendências, dos marketplaces digitais e o retail media em América Latina no Brasil. Sou Matteo Ceurvels, analista principal, cobrindo a América Latina, Espanha e eMarketer. E para as pessoas que não sabem o que faz nós, em eMarketer, nossa missão é ajudar a nossos clientes e leitores a tomar as melhores decisões em um mundo transformado pelo digital. E fazemos isso agregando, organizando, filtrando e analisando dados e perspectivas de mais de 3.000 fontes ao redor do mundo. E dentro da nossa cobertura global, a América Latina forma parte dela, pelo qual temos cada ano mais de 1.200 gráficos, 30 previsões proprietários, 10 relatórios detalhados de várias tendências no ecossistema digital, entre artigos, entrevistas com thought leaders, vídeos, podcasts e muito mais. Bom, esse é o extenso do meu portunhol hoje, mas vou trocar em inglês, mas vou falar lentamente para que todos possam compreender bem. Bom, so what are we going to cover today? So during our brief time together, we're going to touch on 4 main topics. The first, going over an overview of the state of e-commerce in Latin America. Then we'll zoom in really on the marketplace, digital marketplaces themselves, focusing on them as marketplaces as a sales channel and marketplaces as an advertising destination. And then we'll wrap up with how retailers and sellers can really take advantage and make the most of digital marketplaces this year. But before we get started, I saw some of you have come from other countries, far and wide. Some of you are very international travelers from what I've seen on the Instagram feed. How many of you recognize this famous covered market or have traveled to this famous covered market? A hint, it's in Turkey, the country of Turkey. Show of hands if anyone has. A couple, okay, I see a couple. Wow. This is the Grand Bazaar, and it was built nearly 600 years ago. And why I'm showing this is, it is the world's largest and oldest covered marketplace in the world. And in the past, people would, before the rise of the internet, before big retailers, people would go to their local marketplace to find products for their home, food, textiles. But over time, retailers, the society has changed, and retailers have had to evolve to keep up with consumers' changing habits, and the Grand Bazaar included. In 2015, it itself launched its own digital marketplace to help sellers in Istanbul reach more shoppers beyond just the residents of Istanbul or beyond just the tourists who visited the city. Instead, giving them access to a world of digital buyers that have an appreciation and love of Turkish arts and Turkish textiles and Turkish products. So why am I saying this? The main message here is, if a 600-year-old marketplace can digitize its business model to bring it into the 21st century, there's no reason why any of us today here shouldn't be thinking about the same and digitizing our own businesses to keep up with these changes. So now, with that said, let's dive into the e-commerce itself. So within our definition of e-commerce, there are various sources that use various definitions, but within our definition of retail specifically, we exclude a few categories. The first being food services and drinking places, travel sales, which tends to be a very big sales group category within the broader e-commerce ecosystem, as well as event ticket sales and payments, gambling, and other vice goods. And this is just to get a sense of, what it is we're talking about when we're referring to retail e-commerce in the region. So now, when we're looking at the current environment, there are several challenges happening at the regional level for the retail industry. The first being, we have the Russia-Ukraine war. Then we have high inflation still occurring in a few countries throughout the region, and then stagflation. So with the first one, and now although Latin America may not be a big trading partner for Russia. The war has disrupted supply chains and delayed product delivery for certain goods, especially for those importing products from abroad. Now, with high inflation, the International Monetary Funds expect the region to have another year of double-digit inflation, reaching over 13% by year end. Now, again, this is at a regional level. In Brazil, for instance, inflation has improved significantly into the single digits, and so high single digits for certain product categories. So regionally, but we're still seeing a double-digit inflation expected. And then the last, stagflation, which is essentially a period of slow economic growth, along with rising unemployment and high inflation. So these three factors combined are really the macroeconomic backdrop in which the region is operating in. And as a result, we saw an interesting trend in our forecast model last year for the first time. If you look at the red line, that is the line showing retail e-commerce sales growth, and the black line is showing the rate of inflation. So last year, for the first time, we saw that e-commerce sales actually grew below the rate of inflation for the first time, which means that essentially growth last year was really driven by inflation and didn't actually have any real gains. But we expect this to be temporary as we continue on to this year and moving forward with a reacceleration in growth and double-digit gains moving throughout the end of the forecast period. And then an interesting trend as well, with the reopening of society and a resurgence in in-store shopping, we saw a massive return to brick-and-mortar sales happening last year in the black line below. Now, since we began forecasting this Latin America in 2009, this is the first time that e-commerce sales and in-store sales reached near parity in growth with each other for the first time. But like all these trends, we expect this to be a short-lived phenomenon with growth reaccelerating this year. And essentially, e-commerce will grow about twice the rate of in-store sales. Now, I don't say this to say that e-commerce isn't growing. In fact, Latin America is the world's second fastest growing e-commerce market, with several Latin American countries being prominently featured in the top 10 ranking. Argentina in first place, Mexico in fifth, Colombia in sixth, and Peru in 10th. Now, Brazil was very close, just a couple decimal points short of making the top 10 list this year, but it will be in 11th place with 10.1% growth. Now, with this rapid acceleration in e-commerce, it's an exciting time because we're seeing two major milestones happening in terms of sales. Basically, from 2021 through the end of our forecast period, which is 2027, we expect retail e-commerce sales to double in size. So they first surpassed $100 billion in sales for the first time in 2021. They'll reach $200 billion in 2026, and then more than double to $226 billion. So we're seeing rapid growth in sales, rapid acceleration in penetration as a percent of total e-commerce sales as this digital transformation occurs within the retail industry. Now, when we're looking at the factors driving this growth, we have the consumer end, and we also have the major companies in Latin America. And from our analysis, we've seen that essentially five companies represented more than half of total retail e-commerce sales in Latin America last year. Mercado Libre being the biggest component of this with about 27% of total sales, followed by Magalu with 6.6%, Amazon Mexico with 5.2%, and then Via and Falabella with a little less than 3.5% and 2.5% respectively. Now, Americanas as well is an important player within this ecosystem, but since they hadn't published a full year 2020 report, we don't have access to the full year results. However, based on preliminary estimates, we expect it to have a similar share to Magazine Luiza with about 6.5% to 7% of the regional total. Now, why am I mentioning these companies in particular? If we look at all of these logos, you have to remember that each of these companies is a digital marketplace or has a digital marketplace. And that is really the underlying growth driver as what is driving these sales within the region. So when we're talking about digital marketplaces as a sales channel, there are really five things that stand out and make it a really important channel for sellers to take advantage of. The first being increased sales and profits. Marketplaces have massive shopper bases that allow sellers to reach audiences that they would never be able to achieve essentially by their own merit, and really give them access to a world of opportunity. The second, greater reach, also at lower acquisition costs. If you're running your own website, your own D2C channel, you are assuming those costs for the website hosting and a variety of other associated costs. But with marketplaces, these are really built-in ecosystems that allow you to sell and maximize sales. And then we also have seamless shopping experiences. Many players have invested millions, if not billions of dollars into improving the user experience for their customers and really creating ecosystems that allow consumers to have enjoyable shopping experiences and encourage them to come back to make more purchases at higher ticket values and with a greater frequency. And in that similar lane, we see also that there's major investments into improving trust and security on these platforms, whether it's protecting consumer information, financial information, payment information, as well as helping to decrease fraud, fraudulent payment activity, fraudulent products, faked goods, really to improve that, going back to improving the shopping experience. And then last, an ecosystem for brand building. So these marketplaces are not just for sales, they're also advertising opportunities. You can create a shop on several of these, your own storefront on many of these marketplaces. You can then use the retailers' advertising solutions to help position yourselves on these marketplaces and increase greater visibility on the path to purchase. So now, when we're looking at all of these factors, we see that on the consumer side, that consumers love digital marketplaces, and they were the leading platform, especially in Brazil, used for making purchases. Now, websites and online sites were just close in second place when you look at it at the decimal level, but marketplaces were the definitive favorite. And not only that, consumers prefer it, and more than half of consumers said that the digital marketplaces provide them the best shopping experience over any other channel. Other than retailers' own websites, no other channel comes even close to achieving that threshold. And that is also why, when we're looking at these factors, that businesses, especially in Brazil, are really looking to leverage the digital marketplace sales model as a key growth area for their own businesses, with more than 60% of entrepreneurs in Brazil saying that they're going to make it a key growth priority for their business over the next 12 months, or rather throughout the rest of 2023. So now, when we're looking at the opportunity for that, generally we have the more marketplaces a country have usually indicates the level of maturity that that market is. So in Latin America, Brazil has the greatest number of marketplaces, followed by Mexico and Argentina, with 359 and then over 200 different digital marketplaces, respectively. Now, again, these three are the biggest markets in Latin America, and combined, Brazil, Mexico, and Argentina represent over 75% of all retail e-commerce sales in Latin America. So these three are the main drivers of this, but we see there's a lot of diversity and a lot of opportunity for any seller to leverage within these markets. And now, when we look at it as a sales, the digital marketplaces are driving these sales. If we remember from the earlier slide with the companies, we see that in countries like Argentina, last year marketplaces represented nearly half of all e-commerce sales in the country. Now, when we look at other markets, like for instance in Peru, it did, in fact, sales did represent more than half of all e-commerce sales last year. And in Brazil, figures vary, but anywhere, the percentage can range from about 50% to 60% depending on the different numbers looked at. But nevertheless, it's still a massive driver of the retail e-commerce market in Brazil as well. And then in terms of what consumers are purchasing, we have seen greater diversification of the product categories purchased on digital marketplaces. In Mexico, for instance, popular product categories include apparel, accessories, computer, consumer electronics. And then although we don't have similar figures for Brazil, we do have our own forecast showing what are the leading product categories that consumers are buying. And given the greater importance of the marketplace model as a driver of sales, these product categories really will indicate as well kind of what's leading. So in first place, food and beverage, followed by home and home furnishings, then auto and auto parts, and then healthcare, health, personal care, and beauty. So these 4 categories are the ones that will have double-digit e-commerce sales growth this year, which will be driving the country total of 10.1% by year end. So now, looking at some of the key players. This graphic will mirror some of the other charts that we look at, but one of the main appeals of the marketplace model is simply the large shopper bases that they possess. So Mercado Libre, if we look at this thing, look at this chart here, it's the biggest bubble on this chart because it has the largest shopper base in the region. But it's not the only one. There are others like Amazon Mexico, Casas Bahia, Americanas, Shopee, OLX, that are also growing in importance too. And then when we look in Brazil, we see here with the red bars that Brazilian retail or retailers in Brazil are among the most popular websites visited by internet users here. So we have Magalu, Americanas, and Amazon as well in the top 15 ranking. So now, with this digital marketplace model, we've seen rapid acceleration at several of these leading players between the pre-pandemic, which we'll consider 2019, and the end of last year. So Mercado Libre, it's the biggest player. It had the biggest gains in sales, more than doubling the size of its e-commerce business. But more impressively, if we look at other players like Magalu, for instance, we saw that the number of sales on their marketplaces increased by more than 5-fold, or rather, they grew 5 times what they were in 2019. And other players like Via and Falabella have more than tripled the size of their digital marketplace businesses as well. And because of this, we're seeing that the digital marketplaces are becoming an ever more important part of their e-commerce businesses. We're looking at Americanas for the first 9 months of 2022, we see that the marketplace sales represented nearly 60% of their entire e-commerce business. For Magalu, about a little over a third, and Via and Falabella with a little bit more than 20% of their e-commerce business. But it's not only that it's driving their e-commerce business, it's also revolutionizing their retail business as well. If we look at players like Americanas, for instance, we see here in the gray bar that this is the share of their marketplace sales, and the red bar is the share of their in-store or physical retail sales. So in 2020, for the first time, or rather the second quarter of 2020 for the first time, marketplace sales overtook Americanas' in-store sales. And then we also saw similar trends play out for the first time this year with Magazine Luiza during the first quarter of this year, where its digital marketplace sales overtook its decades-old in-store retail business. So impressive trends here happening. And part of this growth, it has to do with the growth of the number of sellers that each of these players are onboarding into their ecosystems. We see a rapid acceleration curve with this chart here, followed by the number of products that they're also offering on their ecosystem. So again, similar rapid acceleration of that. And with this new product offering, this underscores the importance of having retail media as part of your strategy as well, because it'll help you, the seller, you, the shop owner, better position your product offering and increase the visibility on the path to purchase with competing against so many other product offerings on platforms like these. So now, that brings us to retail media or marketplaces as an advertising destination. But when we're talking about retail media, like any new emerging trend, it's important to understand exactly what it is we're talking about, because with a new trend, everyone creates their own definition and everyone doesn't know what we're talking about. But when we're referring to retail media in this sense, it's essentially any type of digital advertising that appears on a retailer's owned and operated digital properties, or advertising that appears on third-party publishers' properties or other media content that's powered by retailers' first-party shopper data. Now, these types of ads can appear on their websites, mobile apps, streaming services, email channels, physical retail locations, as well as other venues that are serviced by the retailer, be it social networks, digital billboards, etc. And now our definition also does include non-retail entities that sell ads for e-commerce activities, such as delivery service like Rappi, eFood, and hotel chains. But why exactly are we talking about retail media right now? There are basically 3 main factors. The first being it's incredibly relevant. The second being it's very effective, and it's also objective. So when we look at these three elements combined, the relevancy aspect is even more important because it allows you, the seller, to get your product in front of millions of digital active shoppers at contextually relevant moments on the path to purchase. Not only that, with effectiveness, you have performance and branding advertising solutions that could target consumers throughout the entire buyer journey. And not only that, and this to me is the most important factor, objectivity, access to real-time consumer data that only retail players can provide you with. So now, when we're looking at the why now, we understood, well, what about it? Within this macroeconomic context that we're operating in, we're seeing that ongoing economic certainty is really driving the growth of retail media. Ad buyers are being tasked with prioritizing high revenue-generating tactics that essentially will maximize their advertising budgets as best as possible and the returns on those investments. We then see the growing importance of measurement. Brands and sellers want to be able to understand what is happening and what consumers are interacting with, and better reporting metrics to understand how to improve and maximize their own retail media strategies. And also an increased need for brand safety. No brand wants their ads to appear in potentially problematic environments, but with retail media, retailers' ecosystems tend to be very safe environments, so brands don't need to worry about their ads being shown next to potentially problematic content. And not only that, there's a growing demand for full funnel solutions. So brands and advertisers are eager to explore new ways beyond just traditional search or sponsored product ads. They want to leverage new branding formats like video, programmatic, display ads to essentially create a full funnel advertising strategy on retail media. And then last, the closed loop attribution. So with these improvements retailers have made, sellers and advertisers can see exactly at what point which ads are driving which conversions and where exactly the sale was made to essentially allow you to maximize your returns and maximize lean into the campaigns that are performing best for your advertising needs. And now, when we're looking at exactly the massive adoption, the why now, retail media is essentially digital advertising's third big wave, and after social search and social media, and we expect it to be eventually destined to be the biggest. So this graph here, I'm sure some of you have seen it floating around social media every so often, but this graph is essentially showing the time it took each advertising format to go from a $1 billion advertising business to $30 billion in the United States, as referenced here. So it took search roughly 14 years to reach the $30 billion threshold, social media 11 years, but retail media achieved this in just 5 years. So what that means is, to get to a $30 billion business, it took half the time as social media and a third of the time as search engines. So rapid adoption and acceleration. And part of this has to do with the rapid growth that several companies have had with their advertising businesses. So with this graph here that you're seeing, the ones in red represent the retail players among the 15 fastest companies with the fastest growing digital advertising businesses. So in first place is none other than eFood in the region, with growth of over 187% last year, which was faster than TikTok's in 2022. But we also see several other Latin American retailers prominently featured in this ranking. Mercado Libre, with growth of 70%, or roughly 7.5 times faster than the global average. Falabella, Walmart Mexico, all prominently featured and growing faster, notably faster than the worldwide average. So Latin American companies are being prominently represented in this ranking on the global stage and driving this trend forward. Now, when we look within Brazil specifically, there are several opportunities to take advantage of. And we'll look at this from two different lenses. The first from the consumer side, and then we'll look at it from an industry side. So from the point of view of the consumer, we are seeing that in Brazil, consumers are embracing retailers' digital properties for product research. Now, this is a shift from years past where normally people would go to traditional search engines to look up information about a product they were interested in purchasing. But what we're seeing now is that they are turning to sites like Mercado Libre, Americanas, Magazine Luiza to begin their product research, which then fuels the importance of retail media to connect search intent with the product they are looking for. And this was, especially in Brazil, when we ran this survey last year in January, and again this year in May, we saw a huge jump in the number of consumers that were using retailers' digital properties, greater than social media, even more than social media. So an impressive change in the local landscape. And then not only that, consumers also find that these retail ads are extremely helpful, or they find utilidade with these ads. So in Brazil, more than half of consumers said that they found retail media ads to be helpful or very helpful. Now, responses did vary by age, but if we look at the age group, the older millennial group, 35 to 44, nearly 70% of this demographic cohort found these ads to be relevant. So for those unsure of whether should I invest in retail media or not, my answer would be yes, because consumers do find value in these types of ads. And now from the advertiser perspective in the industry itself, advertisers are really trying to get ahead and take action to get ahead of the cookieless future. So in Brazil and in Latin America as well, we see marketers are taking action to create first-party data strategies as well as second-party data sharing agreements. And then with retailers' vast amount of first-party data, retailers will really serve that need to marketers in an age when the third-party cookies are no longer able to be used. And then from the actual platform side, there are some very interesting things that we uncovered in our inaugural survey that we ran in collaboration with the interactive advertising bureaus in Latin America. So when we look at the top retail media players in Brazil, we do see that players like Amazon and Mercado Libre have very strong brand awareness within Brazil. But not only that, other local players, domestic players, Magalu and Americanas, also have strong brand recognition as a retail media advertising solution here in Brazil. But interestingly enough, Mercado Ads actually came in highest in terms of the number of ad buyers that had evaluated and used it as an advertising solution last year. And then when we look at ad buyer intent over the next 12 months, we see that essentially it's going to be a very close race between Mercado Ads and Amazon here in Brazil for retail media ad dollars. And then we also see the local players as well coming in with about a third of respondents planning to use solutions like Magalu Ads as well in the next 12 months. So now, how can all retailers and sellers really make the most of digital marketplaces in 2023? So for the retailers in the room, my one action item will be ensure that there is enough value add to bring in new sellers and consumers into your ecosystem. Large-scale traffic has really been the foundation of the most successful marketplaces. As we saw from that bubble chart, players like Mercado Libre, Amazon, Americanas have the large shopper bases, and they're also some of the most prominent players in terms of sales on the regional stage. However, it's important to remember that audience quality is an important factor, since loyal customers drive repeat purchases and can be engaged through improved personalization and curation on these platforms. And then for the sellers in the room, think about a two-pronged marketplace strategy to really maximize your results. So by building a curated marketplace on a branded platform and selling your products via third-party marketplaces like the ones we've mentioned today, you can simultaneously deepen your customer relationships, expand your brand awareness, and increase your reach as competition for consumers spending really intensifies this year, and especially against the macroeconomic environment that we're seeing in several countries in the region as well. And then not only that, move up the funnel to focus on discovery. So marketplaces are expanding their ad offering to include a whole suite of branding advertising formats through their retail media networks. And this is a really important route for targeting Gen Z and millennial consumers who, as we see, found the greatest utilidade with these ads on retail media. And more importantly, with millennial consumers, with this cohort being essentially in the prime earning years of their careers. So they are really primed to spend and have a willingness to spend more on these platforms. And then lastly, it wouldn't be a presentation about trends without mentioning at least artificial intelligence. So really lean into this new, the potential that generative artificial intelligence can provide. So major tech players in the space are really rapidly rolling out new tools to create truly personalized shopping experiences for consumers in real time. And these include things like virtual shopping assistants and next-generation product recommendation engines. So now, I know I threw a lot of information at you, but with all this rapid transformation, marketplaces really provide a unique opportunity for you as sellers and for retailers in the room as well to create this next digital transformation within Latin America. They're a growth driver of sales, consumers prefer them, and they are excellent places for brand building activities. And just remember too, if a 600-year-old marketplace in Turkey can digitize its own marketplace business and bring it into the 21st century, so can you. Então, com isso, agradeço a todos vocês pelo seu tempo hoje. Espero que desfrutem do resto desse grande evento. Eu tenho muitas ganas de seguir aprendendo, de escutar todos os demais palestrantes hoje. Muito obrigado. E por qualquer pergunta ou dúvida, deixo minhas informações de contato, meu mail, LinkedIn, Instagram. Vou estar circulando aqui hoje, se a gente quer falar desses temas ou outras coisas do e-commerce. Obrigado.